it wasn't just 18 murders that they cleared, it was more than 30. They used 18 publicly as they fashioned and formed their case before a federal jury to convict more than a dozen mob figures here. They thought that if they unloaded all 30 of these, more than 30, it would just overwhelm the jury, and they were never going to be able to make arrests and prosecute somebody for those total of 30 murders, so they whittled it down. Giancana's murder was one of the 30, was not one of the 18. So they cleared, to use a police term, the Giancana murder based on information and facts that they collected during the Family Secrets investigation. And these 4 investigators and prosecutors who worked on the case told me that they never received any evidence that it was anybody other than
Street Exchanger. Question is, who killed Ben Lewis in 1975? We know who in 1975. Is it possible to answer this question? See, I don't really know. I think maybe. I doubt it. We'll say, let's see. On the medicine.
As the West Side began to open up, there was a ward called the 24th Ward Democratic Organization. The first African American to be the ward leader there was a fellow by the name of Benjamin F. Lewis. Ben Lewis became the alderman and was seeking black precinct captains. So he approached my husband. George said, well, what did I think? And I thought it was a great opportunity. He said that he had thought it was a great opportunity. And what, did I think last night? We talked about it. So he decided to go to the 24th Ward. Once he got into the 24th Ward, he became what would now be called the AA to the alderman, Benjamin F. Lewis. Ben Lewis got himself killed.
What do you mean, got himself killed?
Well, somebody killed him.
50 years, Chuck.
Stephen Ellison, for 5 decades, since late spring 1975, Who Killed Momo has been one of Chicago's most nagging crime questions. The identity of Sam Giancana's murderer, long considered the last family secret. Tonight, NBC5 investigates the outfit's greatest hit and why authorities believe they unmasked Giancana's killer long ago. 50 years ago, Captain and Tennille had the #1 song. Arnold Palmer was in the hunt for the U.S. Open at Medina, June 19, 1975. It was unusually hot and sticky, and before 11 p.m. under a moonlit sky, Chicago mob magnate Sam Giancana had just allowed a guest into the basement kitchen of his Oak Park home. As Giancana fried up a late-night sausage snack, the visitor shot him several times in the head, Giancana dead on the floor. Does the FBI still consider that case to be open?
Absolutely. We are always seeking for information from the public so we can follow up.
Here at Oak Park Police Headquarters, file number 7507161 is not public because the Giancana case is still officially unsolved. A spent .22 shell casing still in the police file, as is this silencer-equipped murder weapon. NBC Chicago tonight has obtained copies of police records from an outside source that reveal the gun was purchased here in South Florida among 2 pistols bought at the same time at this Miami gun shop. One handgun used to execute a Milwaukee mobster, and the other used on Chicago outfit icon Sam Giancana.
That's an open investigation, so I can't talk to the details of that case.
In your mind, though, Do you believe that the Bureau knows how that happened?
No.
I was born into the Chicago Mafia.
But the case is considered closed according to federal witness Frank Calabrese Jr., who says the killer has been known for decades, supported by FBI reports stating the individual believed to have been responsible for the murder of Giancana is also deceased. The Chicago mob defector speaks about his former life in the outfit to packed rooms daily here at the Mob Museum in Las Vegas, a place where Sam Giancana's mug has a prominent position, from an era when he and the Chicago outfit controlled many Vegas casinos.
A lot of these mob mysteries that we'll probably never solve, and the Giancana one is definitely near the top of the list.
Calabrese tonight says there is no mystery. His Chicago mob boss father, Frank Sr., and Chicago hitman Uncle Nick provided the answer to who killed Momo Giancana that late spring night 50 years ago.
My information that I got from my dad verbally was that Tony Accardo killed Sam Giancana.
Tony Accardo, a.k.a. Anthony Accardo, nicknamed JB or Joe Batters for his fondness of baseball bat beatings. Nobody outranked 66-year-old Accardo in the Chicago outfit back then. Sending a mob legend such as Giancana to the hereafter would have required Accardo's personal approval. But Giancana was actually killed by Accardo, according to mob hitman Nick Calabrese in this FBI interview newly obtained by NBC5 Investigates that concludes Accardo, nicknamed JB, was involved in the homicide of Giancana and cites one mob boss as saying, "You're never too old to work like JB." But there's more. The Momo murder weapon was found right here in this roadside wooded area located directly between the Giancana house in Oak Park and the Accardo home in River Forest. The FBI had Accardo's house under surveillance in 1975. These records documenting comings and goings reveal that one of Accardo's cars left before Giancana was killed and returned home afterward.
He goes along to Sam's house, and they're going to talk about the upcoming Senate hearing commission.
I decline to answer on.
Mob watchers suggest Accardo, Al Capone's one-time bodyguard and driver, was concerned that Giancana was a loose cannon and might spill mob secrets to the U.S. Senate committee that had summoned him.
Sam was the one that could really get Tony in a lot of trouble.
30 years after Giancana was murdered, Calabrese and his assassin Uncle Nick became government witnesses in Operation Family Secrets. Based on their information, prosecutors publicly cleared 18 outfit murders here and convicted more than a dozen major mob figures. But tonight, NBC5 Investigates has been told by 4 top federal investigators who worked on the landmark case that the government actually solved 30 mob killings, including Giancana's. The law enforcement consensus, they say, Tony Accardo killed Giancana. These FBI records state that Giancana's killer will never be prosecuted because he is dead. Anthony Accardo died of natural causes in 1992. He was 86 years old. Here in West Suburban Hillside, Tony Accardo and Sam Giancana's final resting places. Momo's mausoleum as large as he tried to live, and not far off, Accardo's understated tomb, where the big tuna took a tail to the crypt, a secret that lasted 50 years. Bottom line, Tony Accardo had means, motive, and opportunity. His murderous means all the way back to the St. Valentine's Day massacre in 1929. Accardo's motive, a lifelong grudge against Giancana and fear Giancana could land him in prison. And Accardo had opportunity, one of the few people who could knock on Giancana's door and have it opened. And there's the answer.
Pretty
A story.
big player in the outfit. Why would he do it himself? Why do that personally? Why not have an underling take care of it?
Many mob watchers think that Accardo didn't trust anybody else to do it, and he wanted to be the only one to keep the secret.
Wow.
Chuck.
Well, what do you say? Tony Accardo killed Sam Giancana. We had moved from out here in January of '75. We moved to Mayfield and Adams, and I remember when that was on the news. I was surprised, me and my brother Blaine, we actually followed the gangster stuff. Because when my parents divorced, we moved to the north side. We went to the city St. Valentine's Day massacre. We actually went. The garage was still up in '67. That they were assassinated, that they was in there. You know, the Dillinger tours. My mom took us on that down to Wax Museum on Wells. So we kind of was into that, me and my brother. So yeah, it's likely that it seemed, that seemed like something Joe Batters would have done. consider he was with Al Capone in the 20s. He was his bodyguard and driver, and he was involved allegedly into the St. Valentine's Day Massacre and all of numerous murders. So you got to figure that Sam Giancana was made member all the way to the 40s. Back in the 40s, he really to the 30s. He was into that group. He lived on Taylor Street, so his mom died early, something like that. He met his wife down on Taylor Street. They lived around there, and his dad was kind of tough on him, but he got out and hustled, and he got with the outfit. He was in the same little crew called Egan's Rats or whoever that group of people was that started off in. But he was stealing cars and stuff like that. He did some stuff like that. I read about it, and he was messing with. He was going, he was the outfit in Las Vegas. He was messing with one of these singers. I forget the lady's name, but he was very famous. He was in the middle of Marilyn Monroe as well. He was fucking with her, and John Kennedy was fucking with her. He was cool with Frank Sinatra. So he got tight. Him and so it was a thing about the outfit helped the Kennedys get in there. And there's a connection at the 24th Ward with that too. Don't forget. So there's a connection with Kennedy, with Sam Giancana, and Kennedy with Ben Lewis. And the story I got is a 24th Ward story about Kennedy and Ben Lewis might have got killed about this Kennedy issue, the votes. I'm not sure, but I'll get back to that later. But Tony Ricardo took him out, man, because hey, that dude knew too much about him, and he had to go. And but anyway, I'm gonna get on Ben Lewis.
Those communities that were being taken over by African Americans. My husband was in a community, was in a ward, the 25th Ward, which was largely Italian, very largely Italian. The ward committeeman was a man by the name of Vito Marzullo. My husband's uncle was the precinct captain in that ward, and the highest job that he was able to get for his people was either janitorial someplace or as a guard, and the job that he had for himself, which was doing something down at the city hall. As the West Side began to open up, there was a ward called the 24th Ward Democratic Organization. The first African American to be the ward leader there was a fellow by the name of Benjamin F. Lewis. Ben Lewis became the alderman and was seeking black precinct captains. So he approached my husband that he had just met somewhere along the line and asked him if he would leave 25th Ward, where his sponsorship was, to come to the 24th. So George, this was before we were married, George said, well, what did I think? And I thought it was a great opportunity. He said that he had thought it was a great opportunity. And what, did I think it would last? Well, we talked about it. So he decided to go to the 24th Ward. Once he got into the 24th Ward, he became what would now be called the AA to the alderman, Benjamin F. Lewis. Ben Lewis got himself killed.
What do you mean, got himself killed?
Well, somebody killed him. The newspapers claimed it was because he was in charge of the insurance in the ward. Now, let me explain this ward situation to you real fast. Whoever the committeeman was, Jake Harvey's was the committeeman. Jake Harvey of the old 24th Ward in Chicago was the committeeman. Ben was the alderman. Ben had been allowed to handle all of the insurance for all the stores, restaurants, whatever kind of business there was in the ward, because Jake Harvey had his other sources of income, whatever they were that he was doing. Ben tried to take over, the scuttlebutt is that Ben tried to take over more than he should have of the assets of the ward, and that he was killed. They shot him in the head, as I said, according to the newspapers. There was only one person left, who was the AA, who knew all the avenues that were there, and that was my husband, George. George then became the alderman of the 24th Ward.
Did it bother him that his predecessor had been shot to
It
death?
bothered us all to death. It bothered all of us, because it was right there in the ward office. As a matter of fact, George had gone to Northwestern to pick me up from school, and we had passed right by the office. We had to pass right by there to go home. And when we passed by there, the phone rang just as we were coming in the door. I guess we'd been there 4 or 5 minutes. And somebody said that George needed to come right away to the headquarters office because they had found Ben dead in the office. Well, of course, I wanted to go too. George said, no, I had to stay at home. I couldn't go. And so I stayed home. But women did what their husband said then. You know, that was a strange time in this country. But I did. But, you know, you did what your husband said on those awful days. But I stayed home and he went there. But anyway, after all this was over and done with, George then became the alderman, which didn't have, you know, he had the job of alderman, but he couldn't make all the big decisions, and he couldn't run the ward because the ward belonged to the ward committee man, who was the guy who was responsible for the votes that came out of the ward. And he was responsible directly to the mayor. Okay. First time the election came up for ward committeeman, George ran and became the committeeman. So he had the 2 most important jobs in the ward. That enabled him then to be able to say who was going to run, who's going to be selected to go before the Cook County Democratic Organization to become congressman later on down the road. And that's where his strength came from.
Uh-huh.
So it just moved right along.
So it sounds like he had a real...
Okay, people. Now, testing. Okay, we know who killed Sam Giancana. And we had moved back to the west side back in 75, and that happened 6 months after. And Chuck Goudie done his investigation, found out who killed him. I would ask, did you find out who killed Ben Lewis? If he did, he didn't say it. Nobody talked about it. I think it would have been talked about. I think it would have been revealed, disclosed to the public. So, nothing. But this is what I surmised from what I heard over the last 3 years, 4 years, about 3 years. My old hat from the west side and from a brother out on the south side. That because this was nationwide news in the black community. It was in the Chicago Defender, so black politicians all over the city took notice of this and talked about this. So the people out here that was plugged heard about it sometime, probably in the 80s and 90s or whatever. One of the brothers that I kicked it with had his word he had was that Ben Lewis had been talking. Word I got from an old hat out west said that they killed the wrong guy. And that makes sense because the way they cuffed him and him was burning him with the cigarettes, they was burning him with cigarettes. They were torturing him, trying to get him to say something. Say what you said. What did you say? Seemed like they looked like some police shit. Okay, let the police try to force you to talk. That makes sense right there. That's what that looked like to me. Me being experienced with Chicago police. Okay, and then the rumor was the Chicago police were involved in it. Or it was kind of like law enforcement. If not law enforcement, pretend law enforcement. Or tactics used by the police, somebody familiar with that. But more than likely, and it wasn't to say the handcuffs weren't the police type. They weren't the ones used by the Cook County Sheriff or the ones used by Chicago police. But they were handcuffs. It was real handcuffs, wasn't plate. And So, and then, okay, this is where it goes back to. The 24th Ward was a mob, was an outfit back ward. The ward's on the west side at that time. The 24th Ward was the first black ward, predominantly black. But the 24th, the 25th was Vito Marzullo, which George Collins came from. That was all predominantly Italian back then. Ben Lewis grew up in the first ward, which was the ward that the Rhodey family, the mobbed up family, the Capone, that was the first mobbed up ward, the first ward. That's where the outfit, the Coliseumos, all that old time 1920s mob outfit where they started. That's where they had situated. That was their shit. And in the 80s, up to the 80s, they would steal this shit. The Rhodey family had a sitting alderman. DiArco was a sitting alderman. All of those people were there, known as a mob ward, the first one. So Ben Lewis grew up around a lot of Italians on Taylor Street. Giancana come from Taylor Street. Ben Lewis was one of the first family. He maintained his relationship with people from the first ward, and it said that they sponsored his political career. Now, the 24th Ward, all predominantly Jewish, was ran by the old Jewish machine. And they was juiced up and ran everything in the city and part of the country. Jake Arby was a hellified political statistician. And he ran shit. He was on the national committee. So, and then the notorious Lenny Patrick had rackets, gambling rackets, who come from the ward. He lived in the ward. His dad was the precinct captain in the 24th Ward back in the 30s. Lenny Patrick grew up in the ward. That was his ward. That was his racket. He was an outfit member. He was an outfit guy. He was up there in the outfit. The outfit, not only Italian in Chicago, it comprises of Jews, Italians, and blacks. So blacks had a part in it. Blacks wasn't in the rankings, but blacks was earners and stuff like that, as representative, further the outfit's interest. And 24th Ward, 25th, I think the 27th, and then 29th, those were outfit wards. All the West Side wards was the outfit wards. And Ben Lewis getting killed had something to do with the Kennedy win in 1960. 24th Ward was the last ward to produce, to bring out, to release its voting returns in 1960 that pushed Kennedy over to win Illinois and to win the presidency. That was the 24th Ward job. Now, from out south here, the word is, the brothers out here told me this, back in 2023, that they heard he was talking about what occurred in the back rooms during the counting of the 1960 vote that pushed Kennedy over in the 24th Ward. That was the word. Now, the word I got from out west back in 2023 said that they killed the wrong guy. And that sounds just about right for them burning with them cigarettes, trying to get them to tell. Well, what did you say? They killed the wrong guy was the word. So, whoever was talking about the Kennedy win in 1960, the vote rigging, whatever that occurred in the count in the 24th Ward in 1960, they thought Ben Lewis had talked about that. Was telling somebody. Who? I don't know. But apparently, the word is he was the wrong guy. The wrong guy. They killed the wrong guy. Ben Lewis wasn't supposed to get smoked. It wasn't no insurance thing. It wasn't no, he wasn't fucking with no the newspaper talking about his insurance or his lifestyle, his gambling, or all that bullshit. They didn't want to break through on that. Chicago police didn't want to open it up. The FBI had no jurisdiction in something like that back then. So it never was disclosed. So the Giancana murder, he was going to testify to the Senate about what they wanted to know about the Kennedy assassination. Ben Lewis was allegedly killed about what he was supposed to have said about how they counted the votes in 1960 to push Kennedy over to win the election in 1960. And that being said, Lenny Patrick was the brackets boss over there. He was still there when my dad was the alderman in the 80s. Okay? Gus Alex, he told on in the federal court. Gus Alex was around through the 80s. Okay? I spoke to them personally. So, they didn't tell me nothing. Don't get me wrong. I spoke to them personally as a meeting and shaking their hands. And so I knew they were there. Okay? So, that said, and on everything, we don't know who did it, but we think we know why. On the minister, Chicago politics, on the wrong, on the minister. Exhibit 1, the evidence where law and politics blend on the streets of Chi-Town, on the minister, on everything. You bitch ass motherfucker, I don't give a fuck if you was a cop or whoever. You lucky your bitch ass wasn't in Inglewood, some motherfucker. Well, they would have hanged you out there in Austin. You out there West Garfield. Humble Park. North London. Roseland. Morgan Park. Harvey. Fuck out of here. You'd have got handed something. Right there. Right there. You'd have got handed something. You and the motherfucking cops that tried to come to your motherfucking rescue. Still a bitch. With a lawsuit. Period. Bottom line. Gotta have help. People like me. Come fresh out the joint. And no law every time. We all big yourself. Fucking sue. Big time. On the minute. Every time. 7. Street.